It feels like just a minute ago I was wrapping up the first season and we're already at the last episode of the second. There will obviously be the third. For now though, let's see what I found for today. Pyro II is not a game that's gonna impress you with flashy graphics, beautiful melodic memorable music and high quality sounds. In fact, it's as simple presentation-wise as it's possible, and probably only marginally better looking than some of those ancient entirely text-based games. Pyro II uses what looks like modified ASCII character table to present its graphics in text-based mode, with blocks and simple symbols rather than sprites. Music is non-existent, and farts coming out of the PC speaker are all that you will really get to hear while playing. It's gotta be terrible then, right? Actually, it's not. It's probably one of the better entirely ASCII games ever released. Some say that Minesweepers only make mistakes once. Pyromaniac, it seems, at least according to the game's story, is alike. So, you are one. A pyromaniac that is, and you have a very unusual psychopathic system for burning the buildings down. You sneak into them couple of days early and spread gas bottles in strategic locations to facilitate the best potential future burn. This part of the game is not something that you actually do, as the levels have gas canisters preset as a quote-unquote puzzle for you to solve when playing. On the day of ignition, you take the elevator to the very top floor of the building, light the fuse behind you as you run with it rolling off the rail that you carry. Following you just a few steps behind is the fire and potential catastrophic destruction. Your goal is to get all the way from the top floor to the bottom unscathed and with as much fire damage left behind as possible, because you're scored on the amount of fire that spreads. It's worth pointing out that you can pick up gas canisters on your way and then either put them away in a strategically better location by stopping, or spreading it around the area, letting it leak from the canister when you drop it while moving. Keep in mind though that you have to do it all the while constantly monitoring your distance from the fire and running away from the ever-lit fuse and explosions that follow. There are two campaigns in the game: World Terrorist, that has a terrible YouTube algorithm name and is available from the get-go. It sees you burning famous buildings all over the world one by one, and Secret Agent campaign, which is unlocked while playing, and sends you into communist countries to burn their monuments to the ground. Also not great for the algorithm. Pyro II is a simple game, both in terms of its looks and gameplay, but it's so surprisingly addictive that if you honestly give it 10 minutes of your time, you'll end up playing it much longer, as it will seduce you into its enchanting gameplay loop. It's worth noting that unusually for the 1990, there is actually a tutorial in Pyro II, and it's short and easy to follow, so just the way I like them. Imagine Xbox's famous Geometry Wars and then simplify it to the core of what it is. So a twin-stick space shooter. Then add nothing more other than the neat 3D effect to the background grid that will sway the grid in relation to your on-screen location. If you do all that, you'll end up with our next game, Quadnet. In it you're not using twin sticks per se, but two sets of keys on a keyboard. Potato potato, I know, but the difference between the sticks and keyboard is huge comfort and accuracy wise, so I felt it's worth pointing out. One set of keys for direction movement, the other for shots. It may seem limiting without diagonals at first, but you'll quickly get used to it, as both you and the enemies also only move on the two axes. You on X and Y, and the enemies on diagonal ones. There's no weapon upgrades or special power-ups to speak of in Quadnet, but it's also not a game made to last for long single-game sessions. It's a fast attack score title that is made to challenge the player's skills in trying to beat the high score, and not to play for hours on end. So, all that really changes the longer you play is the number of enemies, their graphics a tiny bit too, and how fast they move. And whether you want to or not, you will die eventually, as Quadnet was conceptualized to be very demanding and unforgiving of any mistakes. What it's also designed for though is to be played in any way you want. So you may very well hang out in the middle of the screen, reacting to the enemies and trying to work out around the spot, as it gives you plenty of freedom to maneuver in and out of danger, or plant yourself at the bottom of the screen, trying to play it Galaxian style, and anything in between. While it's definitely simple in its concept title, Quadnet is decently fun and incredibly hectic after a while, with a lot of on-screen action, plenty of near deaths and oh shit moments. It's also an excellent pick if you have a friend that is competitive, cause then it can become really addictive, especially if you're both at similar skill level and keep one-upping each other, swapping the spot on the leaderboards. I know, I already said that Pyro II was addictive, but both of these, given the right mindset and situation, can easily become the highlights of a gaming afternoon. Redneck Rampage is a first-person shooter made using Duke Nukem's 3D build engine and themed to take place in a fictional small backwater town of Hickston, Arkansas. So, most of the locales that you'll visit will be appropriately set in the barnyards, trailer parks, chicken processing plant, bowling alley, drive-in movie theater and the likes in and around the town. You'll be practically able to feel the stench of manure while playing. Story-wise, as in most other FPSs, aliens invaded Earth. But unlike in the other shooters, they did not take it over in a fiery blaze destroying anything and anyone in their way, they only cloned all inhabitants of Hickston, replacing them with their own copies, and worst of all, stole your prize pig Bessie. And she was a beauty, I must add. So, you, playing as Leonard along with your brother Baba, have to recover Bessie as she's priceless. She's a part of the family after all, and not just any random pig.
I'm Batman.
Yeah, okay, let's say that you are part of mine now too, Bruce. What? Sure, yeah, I'd save you too if I had to. He's been getting increasingly more needy these last few months. He really must feel alone. Anyway, all the weapons and pickups in Redneck Rampage are thematically stylized too, so items like beer, pork rinds and moonshine will not only replenish your health, but also cause you to respectively burp, fart and sway while walking, which is not only a nice touch, but also causes you to be unable to sneak on the enemies, which are all different and all have unique and funny tones that they'll use when you're around. In fact, the game is chock full of very hillbilly-like humor, which, while fun in little doses, gets old quickly and soon enough you'll have enough of the same one-liners. Interestingly enough, most levels don't have the exit door, but end with you having to find your brother and then knock him out. Not kill, knock out with a crowbar, cause he's your brother. You know, Redneck style. Redneck Rampage's presentation is top-notch, the engine is pushed to the absolute limits and I don't think that there's much more that could be squeezed out of it. The textures are beautiful, the locale is believable and enemies fun and unique. Music runs straight off the CD and the sounds are poetry of village noises, beautiful and awful, animal or otherwise. If you like FPS games, this one's a no-brainer. It's fast, fun and not overly difficult. It's worth noting that there's Caspack add-on for Redneck Rampage and it does exactly what it says on the tin. Adds curses to the game. Is that necessary? Not really, but it's a nice touch if you want your games less PC. Return of the Phantom is a mystery point-and-click adventure game based on the book Phantom of the Opera. You're Raoul Montant, a detective who's been asked by his friend Monsieur Brie, yes, like the cheese that's stinky but oh so delicious, who's the manager of the opera, to investigate the crime scene and solve the mystery of the Phantom, namely reason for the chandelier crashing during one of the performances right into the crowd. Apparently, a phantom is the one who's blamed for it. He's a mysterious creature that's said to have been haunting the opera for over a century, which raises a series of questions like why stay there and not move to the new location if it's haunted, how come there hasn't been anything done about it in the last 100 years or so, who still believes in ghosts and hauntings. But whatever, it's probably video game logic issue. Anyway, you'll be searching for clues and solving puzzles, believe it or not, but what you did not expect is that it's not only going to happen in the present, but also the past too. And slowly, bit by bit, you'll piece the detective mystery puzzle in full, learning of everything that took place in the opera. The building, its canals, secret hallways and surrounding area is where most of the game takes place, and it's huge. The fact that you get to experience it twice, in different periods, effectively doubles the size of the game world. It also multiplies number of characters you meet and interact with. Presentation-wise, Return of the Phantom is pretty good, with what could be called industry-standard graphics for the time, but it's not gonna blow your mind. What will though is the story, that may seem a bit vague after my short brief initial mention of it, but it's really interestingly told, and the more you play, the more you'll grow curious how will the adventure wrap up in the end. If any of that sounds interesting, then make sure to track down and check out the Return of the Phantom. Ripley's Believe It or Not, The Riddle of Master Lu is not only incredibly long-titled game, but also an excellent, even if largely unknown example of an FMV game that's not bad at all. It's not an interactive movie though, as you really take part in the story and can influence it to a degree. All characters are digitized and displayed on pre-rendered backgrounds, and the game plays like your typical adventure. So you'll visit different locations around the world, meet many colorful characters, and most importantly solve tons upon tons of puzzles. Most of them are inventory based, but they're always rooted in logic, and if you pay attention to what you find, learn, and during conversations, you should not have too many issues solving them. So, it's worth treating people with respect, as otherwise they may refuse sharing an important part of the puzzle. It's actually worth to do it in real life too, and that's a life lesson from me to you. Riddles are not obvious in their solutions though, so it's not just an oversimplified gameplay wrapped around FMV presentation either. I haven't said anything about the story yet, have I? I think not. So, you Robert Ripley, a famous traveler and collector of rarities, who after being attacked on one of his travels in Egypt, end up in Beijing on a trail of Chinese assassins. And as the story will unfold, you'll end up seeing big chunk of the world chasing the leads all over the globe. All to solve the mystery surrounding the tomb of the first emperor of China. Interestingly enough, Robert Ripley was a real-life historical person, so unusually for the genre, you'll get to portray someone who actually existed. Perhaps the story is a little bit made up, but Robert at the very least isn't. The Riddle of Masterloo, with its captivating plot, stellar presentation, fun puzzles and unquestionable charm, will be a very rewarding experience if you decide to give it a go, which I would recommend if you're at least a little into adventure games. Rollerblade Racer is an isometric top-down arcade action sports game. I know, it's a lot to process, but think of it as Paperboy, short of newspapers and different playing. Wow, that's even more convoluted. Let's try again. You're a rollerblader, and you're one of the best, perhaps the best. But it's not been proven, and since you know that you're good enough, you decide to do just that. Prove your skills and become recognized as the single best, as the unquestionable urban legend. So, you aim to enter and win the prestigious Super Rollerblade Challenge, a race to prove who's who in the, let's be frank here, niche and largely unimportant world of rollerblading. To do so, you'll need to qualify by earning at least 5,000 points and completing several obstacle courses. So you'll be competing in the courses everywhere, from suburbs through city streets and parks to beaches, and everywhere in between. You'll earn most points not only by completing the courses fast under its assigned time limit, but also by performing variety of tricks, special rollerblading moves and jumps. There are also bonus rounds that will test your agility by having you navigate through cones or barrels. Overall, you need to complete all events to be able to take part in the Super Rollerblade Challenge, and depending on your score in it, so 10,000, 15,000 or 20,000, you'll place third, second or first respectively. Unless you fail, cause you know, that's also a viable option in video gaming. Anyway, there's two characters to choose from, but other than the gender, they don't really differ much from each other. Graphics are pretty decent, at least in VGA, and generally speaking, look like a better Paperboy. Sounds are, well, in the game, but they're not gonna blow you away coming from a PC speaker only, and they don't really complement the gameplay in any way. In the end, Rollerblade Racer is an average title. Not one you'll be actively seeking out to purchase and play, but if you do have it already, it's also not bad enough to avoid and can be fun from time to time between other, better games. Rotor is a 2D top-down sci-fi action game. You're piloting a craft around various large enemy fortresses that happen to look like mazes, with a task of infiltrating them, destroying enemy installations, and collecting any useful gadgets that you may find. While I mentioned destruction and that you can shoot in Rotor, it's not really a shooter per se. Your shots will be mostly useful in traversal for removing of enemy installations that will fire at you otherwise. Your craft is susceptible to gravity, so not only you have to counter it constantly while moving, but also keep in mind that it's influenced by your ship's changing weight and limited supply of fuel. The movement itself feels like a mix between lunar lander and asteroids, so if you like the formula, you'll love it here. All enemies and walls are deadly upon contact, so keep your distance at all times. There are also boxes spread around the fortresses and they can contain fuel, that's used for flying and shooting, sun crystals. Collecting set number of these allows you to complete the stage and move to the next, so they're arguably the most important pickup. Bombs, from which you can either run off the screen not to fall a victim to, as they explode in between 30 to 60 seconds, or pick them up for extra points, but they add to your ship's weight. And finally, pearls, that allow you to upgrade your ship, increasing speed, engine strength, weapon, shield and so on. You can pick the boxes by hovering over them and using tractor beam, kinda like in Star Trek. And everything with a bit of Star Trek in it is that little bit better than it would have been without it. Fact. Enemies are always immobile and fall into either active or passive categories. Active would be your run-of-the-mill turrets that just shoot in the straight line, and passive are the attractors and repulsors that pull and push you away respectively, and force fields that need to be turned off by finding and shooting appropriate to them switches. Rotor is a careful action game, if I may call it that. Because while it requires you to take often prompt actions all throughout, it rewards a methodic, slower is faster approach, rather than the all-out full-speed guns blazing gameplay. So if you like games like that, you'll have a hell of a time playing Rotor. RS2 is an arcade horizontally scrolling single-player shoot-em-up, and while it may not be as addictive as the likes of Tyrion or Raiden or even R-Type, it's a very decent and fun shooter nonetheless, even if a bit on the more difficult side. RS2 is composed out of numerous levels, always ending with a boss fight, and it's a memorization shooter, meaning it's best to memorize by heart patterns of both enemy waves and boss movements to be able to score high in it. And since there's quite a lot of either, there's a lot to remember. And as someone who's a carrier of a very picky brain that on its own filters through everything I hear, see or learn throughout the day, and then picks only what it deems necessary or useful to remember, I can tell you right now that it's not a game for me. I know that I will never remember this and will always approach RS2 as a twitch shooter, which is not a recipe for success here, I'm afraid. That's me though, and you may have no issues with forming plenty of small and useless short-term memories. The game features quite a few power-ups too. They come in the form of yellow orbs with a letter in them, each letter corresponding to another weapon. So K is half-moon shots, B is target-seeking fireballs, S is scatter shot, and L is laser beams. And these should be best chosen in anticipation of upcoming bosses, as grabbing multiple bonuses of the same kind doesn't make the shot stronger, so each pickup just changes its type, meaning you're not losing anything by picking an appropriate one for the boss to come. Additionally, there's no lives in RS2, just a health bar, and when it's down to 0, it's game over. So yeah, there's that. RS2's presentation is decent, even if not great, but not an issue that would detract from playing. I couldn't find any high-quality framerate footage for it, so sadly what you see is what you get today. It looks better in reality. Saban's Iznogoud is no good, and it's another game I couldn't find any high-quality footage for. Hopefully, this will be representative enough for you to be able to learn about the game and decide if it's something you'd like to try. In essence, it's an action platformer based on a French comic book of the same title. It was also only ever released in Dutch, which may have been the biggest limiting factor in its popularity. Though, and I'm stepping a bit out of order here, I never liked it. The language, however, is totally irrelevant as it's a platformer and most of its gaming appeal comes from its action arcade nature and not walls of text. Your Grand Vizier Iznogoud, both of these I've no doubt butchered here, and you have to get rid of the Caliph of Baghdad to become the next Caliph yourself. And to do so, like in most other platformers, you'll have to complete numerous levels, beat many enemies of various kinds, and face different challenges, whatever they may be. All levels are timed and end with a boss that you must learn and memorize the pattern of, or just overpower to be able to carry on. As you go about your adventure, you'll be picking up different objects that increase your life points as well as better weapons. Graphically, Iznogoud doesn't look bad, it shares similarities with Donkey Kong Country on SNES, as all of its graphics short of some backgrounds also seems like a pre-rendered 3D objects converted into sprites. Personally, I was never a fan of the tech, but some people seem to like it. Gameplay-wise, Saban's Iznogoud is a nightmare, it's needlessly difficult, controls seem to be all over the place, sometimes responding perfectly to your inputs, sometimes feeling a bit off, and it's hard to predict how they'll behave each time you make a risky move. It's frustrating to say the least. But I initially stated that I was never a fan, so keep in mind that I may be a bit prejudiced towards the game. Iznogoud also released on PlayStation, but since I've never played it on Sony's Dream Machine, I can't tell you if it's any better there. Savage is what my boss's wife gets whenever anyone questions her decisions, shows her another point of view, or simply when she wants to telegraph her superiority over her subordinates. She's not great, as a boss or a human. I mean, neither is he, but he's a bit better. At least you know what, why and whom is the reason of his constant and never-ending fury and anger. So he's more manageable, so to speak. This Savage, however, is a fantasy-themed action arcade game. It features bare-chested Conan the Barbarian wannabe type of a hero, the titular Savage. You start trapped in a castle from which you have to escape to eventually find and rescue your love, who coincidentally also have been captured by the same forces of evil, but is imprisoned in another location. Gameplay of Savage is built out of 3 entirely different design concepts, together forming a complete and not so bad title. I mean, it's not great, but not terrible either. It's average, and as such it's worth completing if you ever get a chance, once. The first part of the game is your horizontally scrolling shooter/runner, meaning your character runs from left to right shooting, not stopping for anything, killing buddies and jumping over obstacles. You also collect treasures and weapon upgrades here. Second is a first-person perspective shooter similar in its design to Space Harrier, where you shoot off evil skulls and avoid monoliths. In third and last, you morph into Eagle and fly in horizontally scrolling platform-like stages, avoiding timed traps and shooting at the enemies. It's where you also gain power-ups by shooting bubbles. The first two are quite fun, the last is way too demanding as compared to the other. It's not a game-breaking issue, but the progression is definitely uneven. Each of the game modes is okay at best, and nothing to write home about, but all 3 put together form a pretty fun and complete package, even if not great looking or sounding. That said, Savage came out in 1989 and could run even on the potatoest of potato PCs. So those sporting 8080 or 8088 CPUs, meaning its hardware requirements were very forgiving. 286 was a powerhouse for this game. Not enough to run it butter smooth, but plenty enough for a fluid and enjoyable gameplay. And with this video, the second season wraps up today. Another 100 obscure DOS games we've revisited or seen for the first time together. What do you think of them? Any of them were particularly memorable or worth playing even today? I definitely learned of some new ones and was happy to share memories of others. Anyway, let me know if you liked the video and if you're looking forward to the obviously coming third season. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.